This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. As the Associated Press put it tonight, the North Korean army is warning Washington that its military has been cleared to wage an attack using, quote, smaller and diversified nuclear weapons. Further, North Korea says its troops have been authorized to counter U.S. aggression. Today, the U.S. Defense Secretary said this danger is real and clear, and this is certainly another escalation as analysts here in this country try to figure out what this young North Korean leader is up to. We have two reports to start off tonight. Andrea Mitchell standing by in Washington. We want to begin with our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, in Seoul, South Korea. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. As North Korea made what appears to be its most explicit threat so far, the United States said it is sending an advanced anti-ballistic missile system to Guam in the Pacific. Responsibility for what happens next, according to North Korea, sits with the United States. North Korea's military declared today it had, quote, final approval to launch merciless strikes on the United States, including the use of nuclear weapons, possibly within days. Just hours earlier, the Secretary of Defense criticized what he called North Korea's dangerous rhetoric.
Some of the actions they've taken over the last few weeks present a real and clear danger. We take those threats seriously. We have to take those threats seriously.
But can North Korea make good on its threats? U.S. officials tell NBC News they believe the North can put a nuclear weapon on a missile, that they have missile-deliverable nukes, but not ones that could go more than 1,000 miles and reach the United States or South Asia. But South Korea and U.S. forces there would be in range. And today, the North severed a crucial tie with the South, turning away trucks and workers from the Kaesong Industrial Park, a rare joint effort inside North Korea that until now had been allowed to continue. In Seoul, where people have tried to shrug off the crisis, there are deep concerns. Polls say 2/3 of South Koreans want this country to have nuclear weapons. But that would spark an immediate crisis with the North and the risk of nuclear proliferation across Asia. Secretary of State Kerry, coming here next week, is already sending a message.
The last thing the world needs is more nuclear nations.
But South Koreans worry about the new young leader in the North. North Korea can't realize its threat to attack the mainland United States with a nuclear weapon, but does have more capacity than U.S. officials like to admit. Brian?
Richard Engel starting us off again. Seoul, South Korea tonight. Richard, thanks. And again tonight, let's go to our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, in our D.C. newsroom. And Andrea, not to get flip about this, but the reason people on the west coast of the U.S. aren't heading to shelters and stocking up on water and canned goods is our calculated analysis that they don't have the delivery system beyond, 1,000 miles.
Exactly. And there's no sign yet of mobilization. That doesn't say, though, that they can't use these short-range nuclear weapons, which would be devastating to our allies, would inevitably get us into a war, and would, of course, expose U.S. troops. Also, what's worrying is that they did take that step of shutting down that joint economic zone. That's $2 billion of shared trade across the border. Very important hard currency for the North, much more important to them than to the South. So far, our efforts through China have not worked out. Diplomacy hasn't worked out. And the real worry is proliferation eventually. As one South Korean leader, a ruling party leader, said, and this gets to exactly to what Richard was talking about. He said, when the thug in your neighborhood gets a brand new machine gun, we can't defend our home with a stone. If they want nuclear weapons, if the Japanese do, we've got a serious arms race.
And you're right, this has to be watched for any conflict that might draw in the U.S. Andrea Mitchell in our D.C. newsroom tonight. Andrea, thanks. Now to the story that's